dead on arrival. No, I'm not referring to my current appearance. Rather, it's my judgment on John Salsa and Robert Sisko's anti-sedevacantist tirade, True or False Pope. This 700-page book has been touted as a global and systematic refutation of every facet of the sedevacantist case. Since my last video, due to various medical procedures, I've had a good deal of time on my hands, and I've taken that opportunity to read Mr. Salsa and Mr. Sisko's book and to analyze its arguments. And that's my conclusion: dead on arrival. When it first appeared, I thought it would merit a series of videos that would allow me to present various aspects of the sedevacantist case. But the whole production turns out to be so fatally flawed that it is simply not worth the time or the attention. The fundamental reason is simple. Overall, the authors spend hundreds of pages trying to refute an argument that most sedevacantists have by now abandoned. But what is worse, the starting point for this exercise is a full chapter attacking me for holding a position that I have never held. The author's misrepresentation is so obvious that only inattentiveness, malice, or sheer stupidity can explain it. They base this attack on confusing some very basic theological terms. How can I possibly take their book seriously after such an egregious and epic failure? I doubt, moreover, that many R&R or SSPX adherents will actually read True or False Pope. How many people could bear to plow through 700 pages of its wooden, repetitive, polemical prose? The style is unbearable. It's like something that was written by a tax lawyer or someone who spends his whole day looking at stock prospectuses, which of course it was. And what about all the SSPX and R&R polemicists who have publicly praised it? In his short review, Father Linné felt compelled to mention that he read every page of the book. Would even all the other reviewers be able to say this honestly? True or False Pope's value will be largely symbolic, like many books throughout history. How about this one? Karl Marx's Das Kapital. Tempted by capitalism, comrade? Solution here. Or the Little Red Book of Chairman Mao Zedong. This was used during the Cultural Revolution to justify anything. All you had to do was pick it up and wave it in the air. Another great book to prop up an empty ideology. Traditional pre-Vatican II theological writings, like the one you see on the screen, moreover, were terse, compressed, and to the point. Catholic theologians formulated their arguments clearly and their principles concisely. They defined their terms, and they never wasted a word. But how to deal with a book that is anything but this, and in fact is a sprawling polemical mess? It will be sufficient to limit our treatment of True or False Pope to 4 points. First, I will analyze the overall structure of the book's argument and eliminate what I consider extraneous. Second, I will demonstrate that the authors egregiously and carelessly distorted my own argument for the vacancy of the Holy See. They claim I maintain that the internal sin of heresy causes the loss of papal office or prevents someone from becoming a true pope. It does not, and I never said that it did. Third, I will demonstrate that the authors pointlessly continue to attack an argument that all sedevacantists have by now abandoned. The loss of papal office by someone who is a true pope in the first place? None of us, as far as I know, now believes that the white cassocked conciliar heresiarchs were ever true popes in the first place. Just look at the banner for Novus Ordo Watch. Fourth, we'll see just what kind of true pope Messrs. Salsa and Cisco would want to leave us with. Dead weight. Here is the table of contents for true or false pope. It gives us the overall structure of the author's argument. The authors have thrown in a lot of irrelevant material. So, we will engage in what Bergoglio and other Novus Ordo types call a process of discernment, and begin by eliminating this material up front. First to go, the bits of the author's preface where they attempt to sweep under the rug Archbishop Lefebvre's statements that supported, yes, supported sedevacantism. For the real story, watch my video Marcel Lefebvre, Sedevacantist. And unlike the authors, I actually knew the man, and I heard him say what he did. So, these 2 pages can go. Second, chapters 1 and 2 on the attributes of the Church and its marks. These 2 are red herrings, intended to portray sedevacantism as untenable, even before the authors go on to misrepresent its arguments. Sedevacantism, the authors assure us, is not even worth considering, because it overthrows the attributes and the marks of the Church. But in fact, it is the recognize and resist position that the authors flog in the second part of the book that trashes these attributes and marks. More on that later. Third, chapter 3. This is a windy and confused treatment of membership in the Church. It is a setup for the author's chapter 5, which, as we shall see, refutes the argument I do not hold. Fourth, chapter 4 on Feeneyism. Fine for the Dimons, but irrelevant for the rest of us. And besides, most Feeneyites are blood brothers to Messrs. Salsa, Cisco, and SSPX anyway, because they too will accept no papal pronouncement without a solemn ex cathedra stamp on it. Fifth, chapters 18 and 19 on the new rite of episcopal consecration and the new rite of priestly ordination. These are not directly pertinent to the central issue of the book, which is, can a heretic be a true pope? Six, chapter 20, the concluding chapter on the so-called bitter fruits of sedevacantism. Look who's talking. I've already lobbed this one right back at Salsa, Cisco, and their backers, the Society of St. Pius X, with the video SSPX and bitter fruit. No one is exempt from bitter fruits. I listed 41 from their orchard. Mind your own marmalade. Seventh, the selected bibliography. This is useless and just plain dishonest. I've written maybe 40 articles on sedevacantism. These are not listed, just my book on the new Mass. Messrs. Salsa and Cisco, it seems, want to put you through the trouble of picking through the footnotes to find them instead. What are you afraid of, gentlemen? That if you provide a complete list of what I've written, serious inquirers might decide to read it and be convinced? That said, we can now get down to analyzing the 2 major faults of true or false pope. Sudden death. This occurs in Chapter 5, the sin of heresy and the loss of office. It is here that our discussion of Messrs. Salza and Cisco's book turns from a refutation into an autopsy. The corpse is right there on page 149, where the authors identify what they call the major error of sedevacantism. The false idea that the sin of heresy alone causes the loss of ecclesiastical office is a principal error of sedevacantism. The error of the sedevacantist in this respect is thus twofold. First, the sin of heresy is a matter of the internal form, of which God alone is the judge. Second, the sin of heresy alone does not cause the loss of office. We cannot overemphasize this crucial point. The sedevacantist thesis has been erected upon the false foundation that the internal sin of heresy against divine law causes the loss of office and jurisdiction in the Church. While many quotations from leading sedevacantists could be provided, let us look at just a few from Father Anthony Cekada, one of the leading sedevacantist priests in America who has been teaching this erroneous position for many years. And over throughout the chapter, Messrs. Salza and Cisco keep yammering on. Internal sin, internal sin, internal sin, how it doesn't put you outside the body of the Church. Even the pre-Vatican II theologian Monsignor Fenton is trotted out to reprove Father Cekada for his supposed error. But Salza and Cisco's statements are utterly and completely false. I have never maintained what they claim I have. Rather, ever since I began writing about the sedevacante issue, I have clearly maintained that it is public heresy that prevents a heretic from either becoming a true pope or from retaining the papal office. These writings span a quarter century and are available everywhere. Traditionalist Infallibility in the Pope, 1991. Resisting the Pope, Sedevacantism and Frankenchurch, 2005. Bergoglio's Got Nothing to Lose, 2004. Over and over again, I say public sin of heresy, publicly heretical pope, public heretic, at least 15 times in these articles alone. Messrs. Salza and Cisco cite these articles, but they still ignore these clear statements of my position. On page 151 of True or False Pope, they even quote 4 paragraphs from my article Sedevacantism Refuted as proof for their false charge. But sure enough, 2 paragraphs down in the very same article, I say clearly it is a question of a public sin against divine law. What is the explanation? Malice? Inattentiveness? Or just plain stupidity? I suspect it's largely the latter. On page 141, the authors offer us a list of terms and explanations relating to heresy. They provide a citation for only one of the 12 definitions. For the other 11, there's nothing. Just the say-so of Messrs. Salza and Cisco, a tax lawyer and an investment advisor. This in itself is fatal to any pretense of scholarship. The whole argument over sedevacantism, whether here or anywhere else, turns on precise definitions and distinctions over the nature of heresy, its culpability, its mode of expression, and the extent of its publicity. And it is Messrs. Salza and Cisco's cluelessness about the latter 2 sets of distinctions that leads to their epic fail. They have confused the distinct concepts of internal heresy and occult heresy, and they continue to do so at least 70 times throughout their ensuing arguments. The first concept internal heresy pertains to the mode of expression for the heretical act. The second, occult heresy, pertains to how many people know about the heretical act.
The moral theologian Merkelbach provides the proper distinctions to be applied to the sin of heresy. From his explanation, it is evident that Salza and Cisco have jumbled two fundamental either-or categories. They've taken the concept internal heresy from one category and improperly set it up as an opposite to public heresy, which is actually in another category. But in fact, the correct opposite to public heresy is occult heresy, that is, known to no one or only a few.
Here are the distinctions in schematic form. Mode of expression. Internal. Heresy remains in the heretic's mind. No external sign. Or external. Heresy manifested by external signs, such as words, deeds, omissions, even if no one sees them. How many people heard or saw? Occult. Heresy manifested to no one, or to just a few. Or public. Heresy openly and externally manifested before many. These are distinctions that Merkelbach clearly lays out for the sin, yes, the sin of heresy, in section 743 to 746. It is only in the next section, 747, entitled "The Sin of Heresy is Most Grave," that Merkelbach turns to the effects of heresy as an ecclesiastical crime or delict, the topic that so obsesses Messrs. Salza and Cisco. No public judgment from church authority, they think. No nothing. But one can indeed judge, without an ecclesiastical trial, that someone is guilty of a public sin, be it heresy or anything else, and then act on that judgment. Those living in public concubinage, known public blasphemers, those married outside the church, members of Masonic societies, those engaged in sinful occupations, and many others known to be in similar situations are treated as public sinners without any legal rigmarole or warnings. There's no requirement for getting into their heads and determining whether they really understood that sixth commandment, or that first commandment, or the church's marriage laws, or the prohibitions against Masonic affiliations, or that producing porn is evil, or that you gotta believe the creed after all. You draw the logical conclusion from their public behavior and you act on it. Public sin, no communion or no sacraments, no ecclesiastical burial, no sponsorship, no whatever. When it comes to public sins against the first commandment, you don't have to drag either Lady Gaga or Papa Gaga into a courtroom and put them on trial. As public sinners, they're both in the same boat. And in the latter case, with dissoluble marriages, no Catholic God, Luther being right on justification, and God rearranging the eternity of hell, the boat is obviously not the bark of Peter.
Now, you may be a recognize and resist follower who rejects the idea that Bergoglio is indeed a formal, external public heretic. But please focus on my main point here. Messrs. Salza and Cisco utterly distorted my argument because they couldn't get even the basic terminology about heresy straight. This flaw permeates the rest of their argument in the book and is fatal to its credibility.
Thus, our coroner's verdict on true or false pope, by reason of massive failure to distinguish internal, external, occult, and public heresy, death by massive stupidity in chapter 5. That, unfortunately, though, still leaves us with a zombie.
A zombie argument. In April 2014, Robert Sisko published an article entitled Bellarmine and Suarez on the Question of a Heretical Pope. Mr. Sisko attempted to reconcile Bellarmine and Suarez's teaching on the loss of office by a pope who became a public heretic, and thus, so Mr. Sisko thought, to refute the Sedevacantist position. The problem, I pointed out in an article the following month, was that Sedevacantists no longer believed that Bergoglio, Ratzinger, JP2, or the rest ever became true popes in the first place. These men were public heretics, and canonists taught that as a matter of divine law, a public heretic could not be validly elected pope.
So as the title of my response to Mr. Sisko stated, Bergoglio and company had nothing to lose.
There was no requirement for a public judgment of crime for heresy, and the canonists, in laying down this prohibition, made no distinction whatsoever between a public material heretic and a public formal heretic, between someone like the man on the left and the man on the right.
Nor is recognition by Novus Ordites a logical fix for the problem. Recognition by heretics in the conclave and heretics in St. Peter's Square of the heretic in the balcony sounds a little circular, doesn't it? And besides, could the magic of universal pacific recognition turn someone into a true pope if he lacked one of the requirements of divine law for becoming pope?
Such as, well, baptized, male, age of reason, not insane, not a public heretic, or not a schismatic. Would universal recognition make Mr. Imam a true pope? The bearded rabbi? Her Excellency, maybe. How about a toddler pontiff? Or this guy strapped into a canvas surplice? His schismatic Monophysite Herstuteness, maybe. Francis's Protestant brother bishop? Or the person on the right who's transitioned into being a guy. He self-identifies as a male. Could universal pacific recognition transition him into a true pope as well?
What do you think? Would you recognize them?
A year later, I made similar points in my video, Stuck in a Rut. Messrs. Salsa and Sisko, I said, were wasting their time refuting an argument that Sedes no longer made. But they didn't take the hint. So, smack dab in the middle of True or False Pope, we find 6 chapters, 6 through 12, nearly 250 pages on loss of office.
Why did they insist on letting this zombie argument still mindlessly stumble and lurch around the graveyard?
The reason is this. In their preface to True or False Pope, Messrs. Salsa and Sisko tell us they've spent 10 years researching the anti-Sedevacantist case. Much of the earlier Sede material, of course, dealt with loss of office, so naturally the authors spent a lot of time looking up material on that issue.
But then, Messrs. Salsa and Sisko discovered that Sedes don't really hold the loss of office theory anymore. What to do? They should have eliminated the research that was irrelevant, revised their thesis, and slimmed down the book. That's standard procedure in scholarly writing. It's something I had to do many times during the 30 years it took me to write work of human hands. But they couldn't bear to. So the authors left all the irrelevant research in their book. And they hoped sedevacantists wouldn't notice. Well, guess what? We did. But this giant Salsa Cisco loss of office zombie still goes around looking for a confused brain to devour. If you're in the R&R camp, don't let it be yours.
A true pope? Oh, really?
So far, we've worked our way to the latter third of True or False Pope. And we still have, it seems, about 170 pages to go. But don't start looking at your watch or step out for a break. The rest of this won't take very long.
What remains to consider are chapters 13 through 17 and chapter 20. Here, Messrs. Salsa and Cisco outline what sort of papacy and what sort of true pope they have saved from those wicked sedevacantists.
Once again, it's time for some discernment. Does the true pope of Messrs. Salsa and Cisco, for instance, get to decide what level of assent a Catholic must give to the teaching of an ecumenical council? Didn't think so. Does the true pope of Messrs. Salsa and Cisco get to decide whether a papal or conciliar teaching is in conformity with tradition, or whether it is universal ordinary magisterium? No, wrong guy.
Right, guys.
Does the true pope of Messrs. Salsa and Cisco get to decide whether a liturgical rite is harmful to souls, is covered by infallibility, or is even validly promulgated? As they say in Brooklyn, forget about it. Does the true pope of Messrs. Salsa and Cisco get to decide whether his canonizations are infallible or were done properly? Saints preserve us, no.
Does the true pope of Messrs. Salsa and Cisco ever get to see them drop their Paul-resisting Peter dog and pony show and actually obey? Check back after another 5 more Peters and another 50 years.
So, after your epic fail on internal heresy and your 250-page zombie argument, gentlemen, what kind of true pope does your book save for Catholics?
A pope with supreme authority to teach, rule, and sanctify, like this one? Or a pope more like this one? A two-dimensional symbol, a picture in the vestibule of your local trad chapel, and nothing more? That is just fine with him. Bergoglio is the culmination of a 50-year revolution against the papacy and its authority. And you, my R&R friends, have been a part of it. He's been speeding up the process ever since he stepped out onto the balcony, mothballing papal titles, raucous synods, spreading chaos, outsourcing morality, openly inviting criticism of himself, and generally encouraging us all to make a mess. He's a bomb thrower, and he's happy to make you part of his arsenal. Where then, after 45 years of the Society of St.Pius X, recognize and resist, and countless lay apologists like you, gentlemen, does that leave Catholic teaching on a true pope? Likewise, dead on arrival.